Okay, I'll begin. So I'm going to ask Lotus to bring up one at a time some slides that I sent, but we haven't had a chance to practice this, so it might be smooth and it might not be. But anyway, just to begin, we will have the title of the evening, which is Practice in the Flames. Oops, there you go. Oops, no, you went it as a slideshow rather than as, yeah. Okay, so Practice in the Flames. So this was a title that Jyoti and I came up with some time ago, partly because we thought it was vague enough to be, I could really talk about anything. And I'm somebody who doesn't find it very easy to plan weeks in advance, because I tend to be quite, kind of tend to be a bit interested in what's happening. But if we have the next slide, you'll see the world in flames, which at the time felt like a very apt metaphor and something that was literally happening, because it was at a point where Australia in particular and California were under these incredibly awful bushfires that were just really rushing right through the Australian bush. And we've got Sharon Alika here, and I think she actually witnessed some of that. So thinking about that, as you know, it brought quite a few things to mind. It brought to mind the whole idea of what we're doing to the climate. It brought to mind the fact that actions have consequences, and that we're actually starting to live the consequences of years of treating the planet, some of us treating the planet like a sewage system where we put so much in and take so much out and just don't really allow it to regenerate. But also it's such a good metaphor that the world is burning. So you'll see down at the bottom of the screen it says, all is burning, all is burning. So it's actually a quote from a sutta, which we're going to have up in front of us in a minute. So this sutta is the fire sermon, or the unpronounceable Adita Pariyaya Sutta, since, anyway, the fire sermon sutta. So I'm just going to read it, what's in the screen. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Gaya Sisha, together with 1,000 bhikkhus. There he addressed the bhikkhus. Bhikkhus, all is burning, all is burning. Burning with what? Burning with the fire of lust, with the fire of hate, with the fire of delusion. I say it is burning with birth, aging, and death, with sorrow, with lamentation, with pains, with grief, with despairs. So it's quite a strong sutta. So what the Buddha's saying to us here is that we're burning with these fires. Everything's burning because we're burning with these fires of the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. And it's interesting that that's what he's talking about. And here we are, I think, in a world in which greed, hatred, and delusion has taken on extraordinary proportions, that it isn't just the lust, the hatred, the delusion of a single person, but we're living with the consequences really of collective greed, collective hatred, collective delusion. And the reason why that's the case, according to the Buddha, is that we are caught in that delusion of ego, that everything in a way comes from the fact that we have this false sense of self, and everything that arises from that false sense of self, which is basically the belief on some level that everything really around us is there to serve us. So burning with birth, aging, and death, well, of course, we can't really avoid birth, aging, and death. If there weren't birth, there would be no aging, there would be no death. But there is birth, there is aging, and there is death. That's inevitable. That's really what life is about. As soon as we're born, we know that death will come. And if we're really lucky, aging will come. Because, of course, for many people around the world, aging is it's a privilege. But sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, I guess, tend to be the things that we add on to the birth, aging, and death, or birth, aging, illness, sickness, and death. When I talked to Jyoti and we talked about the fires, I think I said to her, but I was thinking anyway, it's a little bit, we're living in apocalyptic times. I sometimes wonder if I've chosen the wrong religion, because, you know, the Bible seems to be coming to prove itself to have a bit of truth in it or something. You know, we've got the horsemen of the apocalypse riding the earth, really, with fire, floods, inundations. And I don't know if you know, but there's a plague of locusts in Africa at the moment, and we're living with a pandemic. So we've got pestilence as well. So we have got the, all these things walking the earth. But then the Buddha teaches the second arrow, that we don't just live and touch and allow ourselves to experience those first arrows that are outside our control, but we actually add to it. By trying to figure it out, by getting into papancha, and we end up with more sorrow, more lamentation, more pain, more grief, more despair. So it seemed a kind of relevant sutta really for the world that we're living in at the moment. However, yesterday when I was thinking about this presentation, I thought, actually, there's probably a better title for this talk, which is Love in Times of Cholera. So some of you will be familiar with the book written in the 80s by a Colombian author. So we have the next slide, which is a quote from that. So Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Nobel Peace winner, wrote this book, Love in the Time of Cholera. I think it was made into a movie, which I think probably wasn't very great. But anyway, it's an interesting book, and I read it years ago. And then I read it again when my Spanish was good enough to read it in Spanish. It's so much more beautiful in Spanish. His language is exquisite. The story's really surreal and weird if you don't know it. I mean, I won't go into details of it, but it's kind of about love, really. But it's about romantic love. It's about sentimental love. And love in the time of cholera in Spanish is a bit of a double meaning, because cholera in Spanish, as well as being the illness of cholera, also means passion, and it also means rage. So it's kind of quite interesting, really, that I'll just read you this quote and just mention a couple of things from it, and then I want to move on. But so there's the main female character, whose name escapes me actually. This is her. Worldly goods, security, order, happiness, contiguous numbers that, once they were added together, might resemble love, almost be love, but they were not love. And these doubts increased her confusion, because she was also not convinced that love was really what she most needed to live. So I think the thing that interests me in this is the whole idea that what we think can give us security, order, and happiness they're actually so much more fragile than we think they are. And I think what's happening at the moment in the world really makes that very clear. It's clear in so many ways. One of the areas where I've seen that very strongly before the pandemic even, I've visited Venezuela a couple of times now. Now, Venezuela was a country which, not that many years ago, I can't really remember, 10, 15 years ago, was, in my opinion, it looked like from the outside a socialist utopia. Hugely high literacy rate, universities, fabulously working health system, trained by Cuban doctors mainly, and like a social network, a social system that seemed to favour the poor, seemed to favour the illiterate, and seemed to favour all classes, really. Anyway, there were thriving universities. It was oil rich, which was partly its problem, because it was far too, not only oil rich, but oil dependent. Anyway, visiting there now, it's extraordinary. I mean, people can't get food. I don't know how much people follow things like international news, follow things like Venezuela, but it's extraordinary. So one of the guys has just been ordained into the order there, He's a university lecturer, retired university lecturer. He's worked his whole life. He's 60, in his early 60s, took early retirement. And his pension, state pension, is now worth $20 a month, which can sometimes buy him some food and sometimes no. So, and people queue for hours on end to purchase things. People are now queuing for days on end, literally, to get petrol in their car. Anyway, they're details. But the reason why I mention that is that was a society that looked very stable. And yet, actually, it took very little complex conditions to make it, just for it to collapse, really, and turn into a society in crisis, in huge crisis. And what I think we're seeing now with the pandemic that's, sweeping through the globe, and those of us in the UK and in Spain at the moment are under lockdown, as it were, although the British government doesn't seem to like that term. But basically that's what's happening. And it's extraordinary how quickly things can change. That's, I think, the thing that really has struck me. So we can't really look to the things that we usually look to for security. And therefore, in a way, I don't want to sound like Pollyanna, from the little Pollyanna girl who everything was wonderful. And these are difficult times, but I think also there are opportunities to be got here, dharmically speaking. I think we are living in a time where, in a way, as Dharma practitioners, we've got tools which I think many people don't have. Even just the idea of being on your own. I think, I'm hearing some of my non-Buddhist friends are totally freaking out at the idea that they can't go out. Well, I don't like it very much, but I kind of have tools to work with that and to deal with that. Anyway, I was quite interested in the idea of love in the time of cholera, because I think that's what we really need to do. Not necessarily the love that this particular character is talking about, or the book on the surface is talking about, not necessarily romantic love, although, if you've got that, enjoy it and love who you're with, but more the kind of deep rooted selfless love that we know of in the Metta Bhavana. So we move on to the next slide. So this is a quote from Akupa, who some of you, probably most of you, will know. Long time, in 2006 or 5 or 6, he wrote a poem which many of you will know, called the Shambhala Warrior Verses. And I've been thinking about them recently, and I've pulled some of them out. I meant to say at the beginning of this talk that actually I don't really have any hugely dharmic insights to share with you, so I'm really sorry about that. This isn't going to be like a really rah-rah, let's all, whatever kind of talk. Basically, I'm feeling quite sober, and I just wanted to share some thoughts, really. So this seems to me to be something worth reflecting on and worth looking at together. So I'm just going to read this, and then I'm going to unpick some of the lines and maybe just look at some things, some ways that might be helpful for us in the times that we're living in. Put down the leaden burden of saving the world alone. Join with others of like mind. Align yourself with the forces of resolution. When forces of power seek to isolate us from each other, reach out with joy. When you see weapons of hate, disarm them with love. When you see armies of greed, meet them in the spirit of sharing. When you see fortresses of narrow-mindedness, breach them with truth. When you find yourself enshrouded in dark clouds of dread, dispel them with fearlessness. So I've been reading these to myself a little bit over the last few days and just thinking that they seem to be as relevant now as they were 15 years ago or whenever. So put down the leaden burden of saving the world alone. I mean, although we are, many of us at the moment, alone in a physical sense, I think it's just wonderful that we're able to be so connected with each other. But there is a burden to that idea that we have to save the world alone. And something about joining with others of like mind, for me, is maybe the most inspiring thing at the moment. Align yourself with the forces of resolution. Well, for me, those forces of resolution are to do with not actually falling into the trap. For me, personal trap of becoming I'm a news junkie, but like really getting too over involved in every minute detail of what's happening to the crisis that we're living in. To actually think that there are others around us and have that resolution to reach out. I think that's really, really beautiful. And we are lucky as a community within Sri Ratna, or a wider Buddhist community, to really know that there are others with the same values as us that we can reach out to. Align yourself with those forces of resolution to stay positive, not positive in a kind of, I'd like to teach the world, not in a kind of, everything's fine, it's okay, there's no worries really. Because there are worries and we need to be sensible. But resolution to be positive in a sense of really being willing to work with our own mental states. In a way, that's almost our bottom line. I don't know if any of you have been listening to the podcasts that are being broadcast on the Buddhist Centre online, but there was one this morning, which is Dana Badri, who's an order member up here in Scotland. And she's a scientist who used to work for the NHS in their labs. She's retired. And she worked with various hepatitis C's and other viruses. And so in this, she's just saying, she's talking quite a bit, but the thing that really struck me was finding a middle way between, on the one hand, becoming really overly panicked or really sort of worried about this. She didn't quite say this, but this is my reworking of it. So that on the one hand, a kind of panic and really sort of thinking, oh my God, and on the other hand, a kind of rather cavalier, why is everybody being so paranoid? It's no worse than the flu. And actually, I think those poles they're appropriate at the moment in what we're dealing with, but actually generally they're appropriate in any crisis, whether it's personal or whether it's, in this case, global, or whether it's something in between, some crisis that's affecting your particular community, your family, your close and loved ones. They're two extremes that are very easy to get caught in. On the one hand, becoming completely overwhelmed by over-information, by kind of really scaring ourselves. But on the other hand, just ignoring things and closing our eyes to it. So I think with something like this pandemic, and as I say, in a way, any crisis, it's important to get information, to stay safe, but to actually try and remain calm and working with our mental states. So the forces of power aren't exactly isolating us from each other at the moment. It's more something a little bit less political than that's isolating us. Although, to be honest, this has been quite interesting. I've felt a very strong sense of conflict in myself. Maybe not so much conflict as I'm conflicted in my response to what's happening in response to the virus. So, for example, the fact that both in Spain and here in the UK and in other parts of the world, the police are being given powers, the state are taking powers to enforce, if necessary, this lockdown. And when I heard that, I had this two responses. So on the one hand, I thought, well, good, because a lot of people aren't, really following the advice or the requests. So it's important that there are, that it's important that the state, to some extent, is able to keep citizens safe. But at the same time, I have a lot of fear about the state taking powers over. And I have fears around human rights, I have fears around civil rights and civil liberties. So it's just quite interesting trying to work with all those different responses that we might have. So reaching out with joy seems very important, but joy needs to be the joy, I think, that comes from the spiral path, the Buddhist spiral path, not a superficial joy or a joy that doesn't actually take into account what's really happening, but a joy that comes, if you remember, from dukkha, from a real sense of allowing ourselves to feel dukkha in our hearts, really, really settling in, coming in like the helicopter, just coming in lower and lower and lower until we settle into our heart, into our belly, into our guts, and really feel dukkha. But when we do that, from that dukkha arises faith. And when we live in accordance with our faith and we allow our values to stay true, we stay true to our values, even in times of crisis, then what next arises is in fact joy. In dependence upon faith arises joy. When you see hate, disarm it with love. That's so important because it's so easy. I've been having some Twitter-free days because I found myself getting so caught up in some of the things that were being said and where I went to argue with people and where I don't agree and etc., etc. And really what I want to do is reach out with love. And that means I need to take care of myself and take care of my own mental states. So meet them in a spirit of sharing. So disarm with love, meet and sharing. Find the truth, and that's really important in these times, to really, really know what the truth is to the extent that we can. There's so much fake news around about this as well. When you find yourself enshrouded in dark clouds of dread, dispel them with fearlessness. And fear, I think, is as big a virus as the COVID-19 virus. There's so much fear. And I think if we're able to work in our own mental states and our own fear, then we can reach out with love and calmness to those around us that might be suffering and feeling very well-founded, perhaps, fear. So move on, remembering love, remembering sharing. Move into the next slide. So this is a quote, quite a long quote from the Gandavya Sutta, and it's a sutta all about sutra rather. It's Mahayana, all about spiritual friendship. And I think our biggest gift to the world at the moment is the gift of community. And by community, I don't just mean our own Buddhist community. Nothing as narrow as that, but to really be able to reach out into the wider community and and share what we have. So what I wanted to do with this is just read it to you actually, and I just ask you maybe to close your eyes and just let me read these lines, these verses. And maybe while I'm reading, you could just allow yourself to think of some of your friends at the moment. So think of some of your good friends that you personally might reach out towards and you might be supporting through times of crisis, this current crisis, but any crisis. And also those friends who you know can help and support you. So just as I'm reading, just allow your friends to come to mind and just really open your heart to them and just send them all your best well-wishing, that they may be well and healthy physically and that they may find good, oh gosh, what's the word in English? No enthusiasm, that they might be of good mental states. Okay, so the Gandavya. So thinking of your friends. It is hard to find, even in hundreds of lifetimes, such friends as these I have now met. They are valiant givers of fearlessness, guides who give me well-being. With these thoughts I will serve my friends. Sustained by my spiritual friends, I do not fall into bad ways. Supported by my spiritual friends, I do not fall away from practice. Minded by my spiritual friends, I do not overstep the precepts. Roused by my spiritual friends, I do not give up my undertakings. In association with my spiritual friends, I develop the elements of enlightenment. With my attitude towards my friends, purified in this way, I will become unstained by the things of the world, like a lotus in water. I will increase in good qualities as the moon grows brighter as it waxes. So just thinking of all those friends that support us in our practice, those friends that will help us if we're feeling fear, that will help us if we're feeling scared and if we're feeling alone. And also those people that we can reach out to when we know that they're in that state. I mean, one of the things about self-isolating or putting ourselves into these kind of more isolated situations, I'm an extrovert. You know, I'll find ways of reaching out. I'll find ways of getting out there. I mean, not physically. Although I'm going to go out on my balcony tomorrow night to applaud the NHS, but that's by the by. But I'll find ways of reaching out to my friends. But I know so many people who are much more introverted than I am, but not just introverted, but with a tendency to isolate themselves, a tendency to even a bit of alienation when they're on their own, maybe even a bit of a tendency to depression. So if you have friends who you know might fall into that category, I think the biggest gift we can do at the moment is just to let them know that we're there, and let them know that we love them, and let them know that we can recognize that maybe that isolation is painful for them, and make sure that they're okay mentally as well as physically, okay mentally and spiritually as well as physically. So with my attitude towards my friends purified in this way, I will become unstained by the things of the world. So those things of the world are taking us back to the sutta that I read from at the beginning. The greed, the hatred and the delusion that sets the world on fire. The greed, hatred and delusion, the poisons that actually stop us from loving and from being able to love and be loved. So those good qualities are the good qualities of mindfulness and metta, the good qualities of the Brahma Viharas. We've got such a wonderful toolkit, really, to be able to delve into and to be able to share with people. So moving towards the end of my presentation and leaving some time for discussion, back to Akupa's verses, because as well as our friendships, as well as our ways of moving out towards each other, we've also got how to work with ourselves. So in the crucible of meditation, bring forth day by day into your own heart the treasury of compassion, wisdom and courage for which the world longs. Sit with hatred until you feel the fear beneath it. Sit with fear until you feel the compassion beneath that. So I'd really, really ask all of us to try not to let our meditation practice slip in these times. I recognise that for some of us it will be harder. We're knocked out of our usual routines. You've got the kids at home, you know, you've got your partner at home, you've got less time to yourself. So maybe you're finding that your meditation practice is getting a bit put aside. But I'd really, really recommend that all of us, even if it's just for 15, 20 minutes of every day, that we find that quiet space to really go into our own hearts and turn towards whatever we're feeling. Give ourselves the space to really feel what we're feeling at the moment and not get caught up in the kind of rushing to sort everything out. I think it's important that we press the pause button from time to time and really turn towards our feelings. And if we can really do that and go into our own heart, we'll have so much more to give the world. And I love that idea that the treasury of compassion, wisdom and courage is what the world longs for. I think that's so true. Can see that very much highlighted at the moment, but it's true all the time. all the time, that's what beings are longing for. We're all longing for wisdom and courage and compassion. And this idea of sitting with hatred is really interesting. Thinking maybe some of us are getting angry, or we're feeling a bit of a rage with somebody or with some institution or whatever. But often what's underneath that is fear. So not only sitting with our own feelings of anger or hatred, but recognizing that when we're faced with that, sometimes what's underneath the anger that's coming towards us, or the negativity that we're experiencing around us, that underneath all that is fear. Fear of survival, fear of annihilation, basically to the extent that we identify in any way whatsoever with ego. In any way whatsoever we believe, and we do believe that we have this self, then there's fear that that will be in some way affected. If we can sit with that fear, what will come to us is the compassion that I do truly believe each and every one of us have in our hearts. I'll just finish by reminding you of the symbol of our order and community, the symbol that Sangharakshita gave us, the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara. Not the most beautiful image of Avalokiteshvara, but it was one that I could easily find. And again, this is a toolkit all in itself. And I just want to say a few things about that, and then I'll stop so that there's time for discussion, questions, maybe other people's input. So this figure of Avalokiteshvara, many, many years ago, Sangharakshita said he thought this was a very apt symbol for our order. So before I say more about that, I want to just get a little anecdote about Sangharakshita. So a year ago or more, maybe a bit more than a year ago, I had this sudden vision that what we really need at the moment is Padmasambhava rather than Avalokiteshvara. So I was talking to Bhante Sangharakshita about at some point about something, and I was cheeky enough to say to him, "Hey Bhante, I've been thinking maybe we need a new symbol for the order." Shit, I think it was probably a bit cheeky. Anyway, he didn't say, "Don't be daft." He sort of said, what would that be? And I said, well, I've been thinking we really need Padmasambhava. We need Padmasambhava's energy to fight the demons that we're seeing all around the place. And I've given quite a lot of talks on this. I think I talked about this in my talk at Buddhafield 18 months ago, whenever. But I'm really inspired by Padmasambhava. We need him stalking the earth. Anyway, Bhante smiled and he said, you do realise it's the same thing? And I said, oh, well, is it? And he said, yeah, if you think about it, we've got Amitabha, Avalokiteshvara, Padmasambhava, and it's the three kayas, the Trikaya doctrine, the three bodies. So you've got Amitabha, who's the archetype of love. He's the what's known as the Sambhogakaya Buddha. So he's the Dharmakaya Buddha. So he's like the principle of love, universal love that just shines out into the world. But then that's manifest in the Sambhogakaya, in the archetypal realm, that's manifest through Avalokiteshvara. But then on the Rupakaya level, and the level of flesh and blood, as it were, you've got Padmasambhava. So they're exactly the same principle of love and energy out in the world. So actually I was very cheered by that. But that's just a little aside, a little road to the side. But going back to this figure of Avalokiteshvara, there's there's many parts to this, but I want to highlight three. In his hands, at his heart, he has the jewel of the Bodhisattva. And this jewel represents, amongst other things, the jewel that we carry within our own hearts. So this is our duty, as it were. It's our responsibility to work on our own mental states, to polish our own jewel. Because if we don't polish that jewel, then nothing else will come from that. The more highly polished each and every one of us has our jewel of our inner uppermost self, our bodhicitta, then the more that's polished, the more it can shine forth into the world. And then there's the body of Avalokiteshvara. And the body of Avalokiteshvara represents our relationships with our community. So each and every one of us that forms the Triratna community, whether the order, whether the broader community, whether people who really don't consider themselves on the path towards ordination or anything like that, but just who want to practice, see Triratna as a practice community that has value for them. Each and every one of them is like the body of Avalokiteshvara. So our jewel is part of that body, but then it bursts out into the world in 1,000 arms and 100,000 arms and 1,000,000 arms, 1,000,000,000,000 arms out into the world. And that's where we can start to think of how can our jewel, our own mental states, our own love that we can feel, that metta that we can practice, how does that manifest through our community, and how does it manifest out into the world? And there's lots and lots of ways we can do that at the moment, so many ways. But I'll leave it there and I'll let each and every one of you think of your own ways to do that and maybe even share some of them. So thank you. It's nice to see you all again. Slightly strange not seeing anybody while I'm talking. So I'm going to go, Lotus, I think you're going to, if there are any questions or anything, are you going to field them for me?
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. So does anybody have a question? If more than one person puts their hands up, I'll try and notice everybody. Or comment who wants to say something. Annie, you try and unmute you. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
I liked what you said about isolation and depression and various other unhealthy things, which I certainly have a propensity for. But I think I'm also a techno dinosaur. I'm really learning slowly, but I'm learning much faster this year than ever before. Just staying connected is all I'm trying to say. I communicate more with more people than I ever have done before, and it's fantastic. So this is brilliant. Thank you very much.
Anybody else feeling called to say something?
I've just noticed that David's sitting there.
Hello. Yeah, can I talk?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, hello, Parami and everybody. Yeah, sorry I was a bit late. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the lovely talk. Really enjoyed it. And I will keep in mind when you said about thinking of friends that have this this habit of isolating, so in the same line that Annie said. So I thought of two very good friends that I may call later or tomorrow. So yeah, great. Thank you for that. Because I remember being in difficult times, and the one thing that most helped me was a good friend asking, "How are you?" So thank you for remembering that.
Good. Oh, we've got a couple of kids as well.
Hi, Kian. Hi, Mika.
Oh, Charnalika's got her hand up.
Oh, there you go. For some reason, I can't unmute people today, so yeah.
That's me unmuted, yeah. Look, really, really enjoyed it. Thank you, Parami. It's just great to feel so connected with everyone as well. I was reminded when you were talking of Jarvis Masters, who has been in solitary, I think he's out of solitary confinement, but been in San Quentin for like years. decades, in fact. And he asked himself the question once, you know, how can I be a Bodhisattva in the world from here, from solitary confinement? And he's just done remarkable work just through his writing and reaching out to people. And the stories that he tells in his first book, Finding Freedom, of the way he connected with other prisoners, even though he wasn't physically connected with them. And it just reminds me of you know, when we are other regarding and working on ourselves, what a difference that can make just by our practice. So it was just, it was really, I really enjoyed that aspect of your talk, Parami. How important it is that we maintain our practice and what an effect that has on others. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jyoti.
Yeah, I just I'm aware of Amber and Michelle working in hospitals, and I just wanted to recognize that and all the courage and that must be requiring, and just wishing you well with all that.
Thanks, Jyoti. I wasn't sure if anybody on the call, I meant to ask actually at some point. Yeah, so echo.
Abby.
This might be a bit of a ramble, but is this word enough? Am I doing enough? And I think I appreciate what Kurunalaka, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the name, saying about how to be the Bodhisattva from isolation. So I live in a barn and I'm already really isolated, and I went a bit potty yesterday. So there's a moment where it's sort of, I've started to make little films about me in my garden. And I kind of just thought, what can I do? And it's almost, I've been pushed over the edge, and I've started to think, well, what makes me come alive? And I found some sort of sense of creativity and just thinking, you know, like, what does the world, how can I help the world? What does it need? And I keep thinking, I live in a village, and should I be getting medical supplies and doing all these things? But actually it's not arising, you know, nobody's asking me. And there doesn't seem to be any particular thing that I can do apart from continuing to garden. And I'm having a sort of a faith. It's lovely to hear the word faith again, like, thank heavens, that's wonderful, and joy. And I was thinking, well, something will emerge, and this is what I'm doing now. It doesn't feel, I'm getting lovely feedback from friends. They're saying, keep sending the films. It's a bit like, okay, it seems bizarre. And something like not knowing where the effects will of our actions, you know what I mean, or not knowing the trickle effect of, and maybe I just need to be alive and positive. And you know, there's some sense of like a warrior and doing and sort of front line. You know, if I was on the front line, I'd feel like I was really doing something and sort of meeting the world, you know, the coalface kind of thing. And I'm in an incredibly safe environment, and there's a guilt that's arising, you know, and I'm involved with Extinction Rebellion. So there's people, millions of people are already dying. In some ways, this is like nothing compared to what's coming and what's happening in other realms. And there's a sense of like, so not sort of thinking, well, I'm not quite sure what I'm saying about that, but I've got a broader view of all of this. And there's something like not trivializing what's happening now, but sorry, that's a bit of a ramble.
But thank you. I mean, to really take your points, there's a couple of things I pick up on, if that's okay. This virus, the current crisis, I think we're in for a long haul. I don't think this is passing in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you know. I mean, I have no idea how long things are going to take, but one of the things about us keeping our mental states good is that there are going to be people who are going to need us. So I'm thinking I'll probably sign up as a volunteer to do online counselling, but I'm not going to do it quite yet. I kind of want to wait for a bit for a number of reasons. I want to wait for a bit, and then I would probably will do that. But I think the other thing is, as you say, Abby, there's so many other crises in the world at the moment, and that, well, the world is burning. That was where I was going to be going with the original talk. Looking more at that stuff, but in a way that would partly be teaching your granny to suck eggs, as they say, because you lot are all, very much involved in that kind of world. But I think it's true that we have got things to offer, and they're not always the obvious things. And I think it's important not to beat yourself up because you're not out there doing something right now. I do think in months to come, there will be still a need for meditation teaching, even, just things like that. I put on my Twitter account a while back that we were doing morning meditations in the Buddhist Centre online, and our local MSP retweeted it on his, and he's got like 80,000 followers or something. But anyway, he was saying, because I was talking to him about something else, that's fantastic. It's really good to know we've got resources in our community of people that can teach meditation. So, just I think we've got a lot to offer, and the time might be further down the road.
Annie, yeah.
I've become a huge fan of WhatsApp groups. I don't know how many of you know Steve and Dawn Howard. They're stranded in India currently, and they have quite a few people in their group, and they've been sending pictures from India, and there's been a lot of communication over thousands of miles on a daily basis. So, Abby, I think, some sort of creative group, you could offer a lot and get a lot back if you created a WhatsApp group. That's my suggestion.
Yep, lots and lots of things we can do like that. Reaching out, I think, is one of the most important things.
Amber.
See if we can hear you this time, Amber.
Is my audio working better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Got you.
Fantastic. I think I wanted to say something around Parami, you mentioned something, maybe it's about practice slipping, or I can't quite remember what it was. And in fact, I'm finding it at this moment in time, it feels like my practice is stronger than ever.
Yeah.
Because it has to be. I was just speaking to a friend earlier, and I was saying how I'm not watching Netflix or TV. I keep trying, because that's the habit that I'm used to, and I keep putting it on, and it just feels emptier than ever. Which is, it's just a very unusual thing for me. I've never really felt that before, of how empty my usual distractions feel in the face of a lot of suffering. And how, I would much prefer to be on a Zoom call and hear a Dharma talk or do a meditation than I would watch Netflix, where normally it feels like the other way around. I have to put a bit of energy into meditate, and where now it's like, I've got to meditate, I've got to keep well.
Great.
We all do.
Well, that's really good to hear, Amber. I think I'm finding something a bit similar, because I'm a bit of a Netflix junkie, but actually I haven't really been watching very much at all. Partly I spend so much time in front of this screen that I'm in front of at the moment. I feel as if I'm living my life in a, I don't know, Google box or something, Google box, whatever it's called, I don't know. But and all these people in their wee boxes, and yet actually you can feel very, very connected with them. It's quite extraordinary, really. So it's great. And I think in terms of practice, some of you will know this, but I was supposed to be leading the 3-month women's ordination retreat at Akashavana, which I should be, this time next week, I should be getting on the Caledonian Sleeper to start the journey on the train down to Spain and up to Akashavana. And it was quite a really hard decision, but at some point about a week ago we realised there was no way it was going to be able to happen. So we had to cancel it. And that's been really interesting because I've had a bit of a momentum thinking practice in a particular way and really looking forward to these 3 months up a mountain, turn the phone off. Well, I wasn't actually looking forward to the mountain that much, but anyway, I was looking forward to the retreat. I wasn't looking forward to the cold. But anyway, it sort of just isn't happening. Just like that. You know, in a flash, we had to just let everybody know, 23 women, sorry, you're not going to get ordained this year in that, under those circumstances. It was very sort of big deal for people. It was a much bigger deal for them than it was for me, really. But it sort of made me think, what is your practice? What have you got to fall back on? And it isn't to do with being up a mountain, and it isn't to do with being in a retreat even, or having, you know, living in a community. All of those things are wonderful, and they manage to help you to go deeper in your practice. At the end of the day, you just got to get on with it, don't you? That's been quite a big lesson, I think.
Yeah, I've been experiencing something similar to what Amber says, and the same. I think there are things in my life that have seemed essential, like going to the gym, I go to a coffee shop about 3 or 4 times a week because I work from home, so I like being out.
Yeah.
That. School, I thought, I've always kind of said that I'm not a 24/7 mum. I love being a mum, but it's great because I'm a working mum, so you know. But no, none of it was actually essential. Netflix was not essential. Yeah, it's all kind of dropped away, and behind it, there's still so much other stuff, and life is full as ever. You know,
it's great to hear. Yeah, really good.
Mark.
Yeah, it's just a comment. I've related a lot to some of the reflections, particularly from Abby, that one of the things about this that is really challenging is having your normal roles kind of stripped away. So it's like, oh yeah, I've got a cough, so my role is to sit in a house on my own until it goes away, you know, and it just feels difficult. Yeah, like it's as though the stakes are suddenly raised, where it's like navigating a path through that is a lot harder than navigating a path through my normal daily life, and maintaining some sort of good or reasonable mental state. So I guess I just wanted to share that sense of walking a bit of a kind of tightrope when it comes to practice, or like there seems to be it's very clear if what I'm doing is working or not, you know. And I've been in some, you know, I've really struggled at times, and then at times I've found things that worked, and yeah, it's like playing a computer game the next level up or something. Yeah. So yeah, that was my comment. So I appreciated what you said about reaching out. That's something I could certainly think about more.
I'm just wondering about the time, whether I don't want to stop if anybody else wants to, you know, comment. And I'm really enjoying hearing people. It's very inspiring. If we wanted to do even like a 10-minute set, we need to do it now, or even a little bit less, just to get. I think it'd be quite nice to finish together in a silent. Yeah, are people up for that? Okay, so I make it just before 1:45, so maybe just do, because you want to do some like closing things, don't you, Lotus?
Yeah, just a couple of things at the end. Would you like me to do that now?
No, actually, why don't we just sit for like about 8 minutes or something, and that will still leave you time to make.
Yeah, it literally just take me a couple of minutes. It's just kind of introducing the next talk and that kind of thing. Yeah. Are you going to be doing any final thoughts, or is it okay to stop? Excuse me. Okay to stop the recording now?
Well, let me just say before you stop, in case MD's looking at this later, just to remind you that there is the stuff on the Buddhist Centre online. You know, there's a couple of meditations a day people can join in, and there's podcasts, and there's Dharma talks and various things. So if you want to have a look at that, it's thebuddhistcentre.com/toolkit, and there's a whole load of things there. So Yeah.
Okay.